Hello there, TikTokers. I am going to continue. I am the biblical translator, and I'm going to continue with the text from yesterday. It's taken from 1 Corinthians 15:21. I will speak to my own people through strange languages and through the lips of foreigners, but even so they will not listen to me, says the Lord. So you see that speaking in tongues is a sign, not for believers, but unbelievers. Prophecy, however, is for the benefit of believers, not unbelievers. And when I was thinking about that, about I will speak to my own people in a language I will speak to my own people through strange languages. I was thinking about legalese and technical language and language that we don't understand. Even though we are born in the country, we understand English. We were taught in school to speak English. There are certain languages, or they have created languages that we do not understand. And they create that language in order to control, in order to make some of us feel inferior, in order to give accolades to those who understand it, like lawyers, and not even teachers, because teachers, even though they have some complex, let's say professors, solicitors or lawyers, the people in government, who write the policies, the police force, they all create languages. Well, not even the police force, the people who write the policies for the police force create a language that us ordinary people do not understand. And it's deliberate. It's deliberate because, I say it's deliberate because sometimes when we are going about our daily business, we do not know when the law has changed. We do not know what's in the law. We grow up with the law, and occasionally we're notified of changes in the law. Like we're notified of changes in the speed limit if you read the newspaper. It's not broadcasted on the news, it's not broadcasted on radio, you just happen to come across it somehow. Maybe on TikTok, maybe on Instagram, maybe on YouTube, whatever, you might come across changes in the law. But it's not open, it's not transparent. The law is not transparent. We cannot understand it unless you have been trained. And so when we're thinking about strange languages, we don't always have to be thinking about people who are foreigners. Like it says, we'll speak to you through the lips of foreigners. But even so, they will not listen to me, says the Lord. That is because people have an opinion about foreigners. People are skeptical about things that are strange, that are unusual. Any kind of change is met with skepticism. And it's not only people who are foreign. If you go to a job and they say they're going to change the practices and they're going to start a new format, or they're going to do things in a different way, people automatically are skeptical and nervous, and they're a bit worried about how they're going to cope. And that's why when they speak if God speaks through foreigners, he's not going to hear, because there's a block. There's a block with a lot of people when they see a black face. When they see anyone of colour, there is a block. They cannot hear what that person is saying. They see the face, they see the colour, and they make an assumption or an opinion about what that person is going to say. So it's a difficult one. I always say it's a difficult one, because when you're thinking about things that are strange and things that are unusual, that is what helps us to grow. When we can adapt to situations, when we are willing to learn new ways of working, new ways of thinking, not only about other people, but about ourselves, evaluating our thoughts, evaluating our actions, and trying to make yourself into a better person by being more open, by being more accepting, by being more tolerant, by being more patient, by being more loving, not only to those who you know and people who are au fait with you and who you're familiar with. God even says, what is the point of loving those people who you already know, could be your relatives or your loved ones? It's easy to love people who are in your life. But he says it's much harder to love those other people, the strangers, the foreigners, the people who are different from you. So he goes on to say that you see that speaking in tongues is a sign not for believers but unbelievers. And that is because when people kind of see people speaking in tongues, they do not understand. And they will marvel at it and they'll try to get some grips to it. And those people who speak in tongues, they're meant to ask God to find an interpreter in their midst, so that people who are not believers or people who don't understand can understand what is being said. Otherwise, it has no value when it just sticks to the one person. When you're speaking in tongues, you're supposed to be sharing the power of the Spirit with other people. But if you're just babbling on by yourself, what good is that? People will just think you're crazy, especially people who are new into the church, people who are strange, people who will see it strange. That's why, when we think about even relationships, when we first meet somebody, they're strangers. Then at some point, once you get married, they're in your bed. At one point, you didn't know who they were. But you decided to be patient to find out who they were. You decided to be tolerant. You decided to be accepting. You decided to love. You decided to forgive. And slowly that stranger was no longer a stranger. That foreigner became familiar. And he was able to move on and move forward with a stranger or with a foreigner, because you took time to understand that individual. You took time to understand their language. And when they're talking about language, it's not even just the verbal language. It's body language. It's the different cultures. It's the language of the individual, how they speak, how they operate, how they interact, which is different from yourself. We're so busy judging and criticizing other people that we don't stop to think that they are speaking. Everyone speaks in their own language. Everybody has their own identity and culture. And everybody, whether it's your child or whether it's a stranger, they have their own language that we must try to understand. And that's why I said communication is so important, because you need to communicate your language so that another person can understand it. Prophecy, however, is for the benefit of believers, not unbelievers. And that is because prophecy has to do with faith. When people predict, you have to have faith that what they're saying is going to come about. A lot of times, because there are so many scammers and so many people looking for fame and want to be on the front of the news, they make out like they can forecast when they can't. Sometimes, like I said yesterday, it's coincidental that somebody happens to forecast something based on a set of circumstances. So if there's prophecy, and if you believe God is going to make things good for you, that comes from faith. And that comes by being a believer, believing that things will work out for you despite how it seems. Sometimes things seem so terrible and awful. And this morning I was reading on Facebook, this guy said, why did God cause Hurricane Beryl? Look at this person's house, and that person is praising God. You cannot tell people how to worship, whether they're lost or whether they gain.